Hi everyone, it's Rizwan. As many of you know, I'm also an English language teacher. I have taught English at different institutes. Let me tell you when and where I actually started. I started teaching English in my native village in 2007. I taught teenage boys and some adult men. The population of our village was huge. The surprising thing is that only 2 or 3 female students came to learn English. During those days, I began to realize how limited women are in our society and how men use them for their own benefits and household chores. Today's story is about such a man who uses women for his pleasure and entertainment. The title of the story is The Lost Breath. I'd like to tell you the blurb of this story. The Lost Breath is a tale of forgiveness and compassion. Jalal, nearing the end of his life, is haunted by the memories of his misspent youth and a woman he wronged. Feelings of betrayal and regret hurt him as much as the pain in his back. After being moved to a nursing home, he continues to relieve the sorrow that he had thrust upon his wife Rubab. Fate intervenes and brings the two together many years later with the assistance of a son he had never met. Jalal seeks redemption before he dies, but will Rubab forgive him? That's what you have to find out by watching the video up to the end. Today's video is special for 2 reasons. First, it is the longest video I have created so far. Second, the narrator of this story has given a video feedback about the story and me, the author. So let's go to Jalal and see what she says.
The Last Breath by Rizwan Ahmed Memon. Rizwan Ahmed Memon's short story, The Last Breath, comes from his 3rd collection of short stories entitled Under the Shadow of Ignorance. In The Last Breath, Rizwan confronts the potential for horrific behaviour which lies within all people, but especially men, because of their power over women and people of lower social status. Unless men are aware of principles of right and wrong, there's nothing to stop them from behaving with all the cruelty of animals. Rizwan's leading character in The Last Breath is just such a person. He's old and lies at home in declining health, more or less waiting to die. He comes from a powerful provincial family. His life has been financially successful. He lives in a substantial house in Karachi. Behind appearances, however, there is a man whose conscience is increasingly tormented by a terrible deed that he carried out in his youth, deeply wounding a young girl from a poor family. Despite his having married her, the old man brought shame upon the girl and her family, and had the power to destroy their lives, along with, eventually, his own. Well, almost. The strength of Rizwan's writing is his moral courage. His description of the outrage that his old man had planned for this innocent young girl is shockingly brutal. Yet, as the life of the central character passes, he dwells increasingly on the horror that formed a turning point in his life. Perhaps the old man began to repent when he was, in turn, left by his second wife, along with the son she had borne to him, but didn't really want as she pursued her own interests. As their story will show, it's not only men who are capable of selfishness, dishonesty and deceit. However, despite her callous behaviour, this woman too, much later in her life, is confronted by an overwhelming need to account for her own moral failings and confess them from afar to her husband, Jalal, the old man. Rizwan skillfully constructs his story using some of the clever elements that we frequently see in movies from the subcontinent. Contrast and comparison between the families are clearly drawn, so that the story is easy to read and characters easily recognised. The ending, which I would prefer you to read yourself, is positive. Rizwan's story of the last breath is finally about how people can, though do not always, draw on their inner humanity to overcome serious and painful challenges that earlier decisions have created. Above all, Rizwan Ahmed Memon is a teacher. He teaches adults the English language and writes thoroughly engaging stories to use for the purpose. These stories give his students a chance to consider some of the issues that people need to think about if they wish to lead a good life, not simply a financially secure life, but one that is freed from the shadow of ignorance. Rizwan strongly believes in the power of education and is providing a great and selfless service, which I applaud.
Now, without any delay, let's read and listen to the story. I'll share how I got the inspiration for this story later on. I'll also reflect on the messages of the story. Stay tuned.
The Last Breath. Author Rizwan Ahmed Memon. My son, Jalal, had given me 2 different kinds of medicine that claimed to induce a deep, relaxing sleep. But after taking both, I still didn't feel the slightest bit drowsy. My chronic back problems had flared up, and I couldn't even bend down to touch my own feet, a problem that comes with old age. Living at home was awfully lonely. Hardly anyone would ever talk to me. This endless loneliness had only added to my health problems and haunted every waking hour. Now, lie down on your bed, Karara, and let the medicine take effect, my son said while leaving the room. You won't be alone anymore. I have spoken with the manager of the local nursing home. They will probably come to take you there tomorrow. He closed the door. I shook my wrinkled head in resigned affirmation, thinking to myself, a nursing home sounds good. I was sick of the loneliness I felt at home, so going to a nursing home would somehow alleviate the feeling, I thought. Taking off my thick, heavy glasses, I looked into the large oval mirror on the dressing table and placed my glasses in their usual spot. The closed-off room was as silent as a graveyard and felt completely disconnected from the bustling streets just outside. The silence was like a venom, gradually devouring the already tattered fabric of my heart, and the oppressive height and weight of the surrounding walls closed in around me like the ravenous mouth of some cruel lion, preparing to swallow me whole. I looked in the mirror at my pale, longing eyes, starved in their desire of many years to see my wife Rubab and the streets of my native village. Overwhelmed by my desire to see her and the oppressive atmosphere of solitude, I collapsed on the bed. As I had feared, the same flashbacks recurred. My memories of Rubab flickered like a film to which I alone was its audience. The echoes of cries resounded in the background of my mind, and my old native home gradually surfaced before the eyes of my consciousness. The medicine appeared to be useless even after an hour. I kept tossing and turning. However, far more effective than any medicine was that terrible, painful venom ruthlessly biting at my heart. The anguish it inflicted was a burden that I desperately wanted to share with someone so as to win some relief from its relentless onslaught. Yet, in that moment, my loneliness, disease and desire trapped me in an isolation deeper than the solitary flights of a hawk on the hunt. The lights of Karachi didn't amuse me at all. On the contrary, my weak eyes ached from their brightness. The shopping malls, parks and zoos had lost all their charm for me after the craze of youth, wealth and lust had died down. All paled after realizing how much injustice I afflicted on Rubab. This city seemed well suited for only rich young men, not for a decrepit 75-year-old man like myself. I ventured only to the street downstairs. The long winding stairs were difficult to descend, but I often felt suffocated in the house, and the open air was my only respite. I would sit by the street and watch people pass by. I felt lost in the commotion of the city. My heart weighed with regrets. Wajdan didn't have time to listen to me, even though I had so much to tell. Uncaring time assured the night passed, and in the pale morning, the home cook brought my breakfast. Dada, the cook entreated, eat your breakfast and get ready. Today you are going to the nursing home. I didn't say a word. With hardly enough time to finish breakfast and change my clothes, there was no time to talk. My son came. Karara, he told me, his voice soothing. Don't worry, I'll visit you every weekend. If you need anything, feel free to ask the worker or the cook. I'm leaving for work now. They will help you with everything. Dada, the cook inquired after my son had left. Why does your son call you Karara? It is not a good word for father. It means old, I replied tiredly. Am I not obviously old? The cook just looked at me in silence. Shortly thereafter, a van came with a young doctor who greeted me as he stepped out saying, Assalamu alaikum, Baba. His warm, humble manner touched my heart. When he approached me, he touched my feet and said, I'm late, but I have finally come. He spoke as though he had known me for ages. I kept looking at his face, which resembled mine in the days of my youth, round with reddish lips. His hair was black and wavy, and his body was tall and sturdy as mine once used to be. However, his smile seemed more sincere than the one I used to have. Baba, let me help you get into the van, he said as he tenderly took my hand. His treatment of old people was kinder than mine when I was his age. Don't worry about anything. I'll take all your luggage and put it safely in the van, he said as he handed me my walking stick. This doctor is more respectful towards me than my own son, I mused. The young doctor took me to the nursing home, a 3-hour drive through the thick traffic of Karachi. My new 4-bed room seemed cosier than my previous room. This is your bed, Baba, he said, helping me sit on it. Near my bed was the bed of an old woman who during her waking hours was permanently consigned to her wheelchair. Ada, how do you do? She smiled. Her face was full of wrinkles, but she had a genuine warmth that made everyone instantly like her. "How do you do?" I replied. We chatted for a short time until the pain in my back forced me to lie down. While I was less lonely at the nursing home, I spent every day lost in my thoughts of Rubab. I could picture her clearly in my mind, sitting on the bed, wearing her bridal dress. Almost a month passed, but my son hadn't yet come to see me. The young doctor, however, came to see me every day. "You seem to be brooding over something all the time. Would you mind sharing it with me?" asked the woman in the wheelchair, noticing my constant silence and sadness. "I have also observed no one visits you." "My son is a banker, so he is often busy. He will come one day," I retorted. "Everyone gets sick of old people." "It's a hard truth," she said. Then I returned to my silent state. Days kept passing. The roommates and I exchanged a little dialogue every day. I wanted to talk to the young doctor, yet, for some reason, I could never bring myself to do so. One day, I asked the woman next to me, "The young doctor who looks after this nursing home, what's his name?" "Rahit. He is a Hindu." "Ah, a Hindu." "Yes." "I don't know why, but he feels like my own family." "Yes, he is a kind man, like his mother Rubab." My eyes widened as I heard that name. I put on my glasses quickly and moved closer to the woman. "Rubab? That is a Muslim woman's name," I added, with astonishment. "I don't know," my elderly roommate replied. "That's what she told me when she came to visit the nursing home last year." "But why are you so curious?" Stepping back to my bed, I replied, "It's strange, you know, a Hindu woman with a Muslim name." "It is not that strange," she shrugged. "There are many mysterious things in this world. For example, what can be odder than having offspring who send us to these nursing homes to die, out of sight and out of mind?" I intently observed Rohit as he went from bed to bed, visiting each elderly person in the nursing home. When he came to me, he said, "Baba, I will sit with you for a while. I know you want to talk to me." He took my hand and asked me to walk outside. He asked me about my back pain and sleeping schedule. "I am happy here," I replied. "My happiness increases when I see you. I don't know why." He smiled and looked into my eyes. "If you don't mind, may I ask you something?" I asked tentatively. "Not at all, please ask," he encouraged. "You're a Hindu, but your mother's name is Rubab, a Muslim name." "Yes, my mother is Muslim. I am also Muslim. It's just a name that my father gave to me." "Your father gave you a Hindu name?" "He's not my actual father. He raised me. I mean, he did more for my mother and me than my biological father." "I don't understand," I replied, hoping he would tell me more. "My mother once told me that she tried to commit suicide for some reason after the first night of her marriage. Feeling desperate, she actually jumped into the rice canal in Lakhana. She was saved by Dr. Lal Chanda, the man who helped bring me up." He seemed deep in thought. "My mother told me that her husband was not only unfaithful, but also physically abusive and violent." He shook his head, his smile returning. "Well, it's water under the bridge. and a story long past. We don't know anything about that man now. After hearing Rahit's story, I finally realised why it felt like he was my own family and why he seemed to resemble me so much. He was my own son. Coming to this realisation, my hand, which Rahit had held in his hand, started to shake. My body trembled. "Are you all right?" he asked. "No, I'm feeling cold." "Please take me back to my bed," I replied, brokenly. Fragmented words crumbled to pieces the moment they left my mouth. I did not know how Rahit managed to understand me. My back was hurting so much from the shaking that it was almost like I was attempting to lift the sky itself with every breath. Back inside, Rohit helped me lie down on my bed and put a bed sheet on me, but still I was trembling. He brought 2 more sheets, but they did little to help me. It was early spring, yet I was shivering as if it were midwinter. The realisation that Rohit was my son rocked me to my very core. Rohit stayed at the nursing home late that night until I fell asleep. The next day he came early and asked how I was feeling. I didn't dare look into his eyes that day. I felt so ashamed of myself. I wondered how ashamed he would be if he knew I was his father. "How many siblings do you have, son?" I asked him. Rohit smiled because I had never called him son. I always referred to him as young doctor. "None, Baba. Mother never married after she left her husband's home," he replied while checking my pulse. "You're fine now. Just a little low blood pressure. I have prescribed some tablets. The nurse will bring them." I wondered if Rohit sensed that I had something to do with his life story, but if he suspected so, he didn't ask. I was relieved that he didn't. I wasn't ready to admit my wrongdoings, and he probably didn't want to hear anything more about his mother's sad past. The days continued to pass, and my desire to see Rubab, to seek forgiveness, only increased. Now that I knew she was alive and within reach, I longed to speak with her before my last breath. I had to fight an internal battle every day. I was uneasy with remorse and, in my desperation to find forgiveness, my mind and heart remained fixed on those I had wronged, on their innocence, and on my own personal feebleness. This fixation was like a taut rope, binding me and draining my peace, my confidence, and even, ever so gradually, the waking alertness from my mind. One night, in that mental and spiritual bondage, I fell into the darkness of sleep and had a dream. I had crawled to Rabab to search for my forgiveness and for my freedom. Her eyes tore into me and she hissed, "Have you come to claim your bride?" "No," I blurted out with a mixture of shame and pleading. "Well, in a way, let me explain." Before I could give my explanation, she had pounced across the room and lashed her palm across my face. One of her nails, long and jagged, drew a line of blood across my face. Perhaps because I was surprised by her sudden fury, and perhaps because I believed that I deserved it, I let the full force of her strike seep down into the depths of my marrow. I let its force propel me onto the sofa and let its reverberation shatter the arrogance of my legs that fought to keep me standing proudly. I crumpled to the ground, and before her I was still and small, meek and humble, a perfect supplicant begging for compassion. I let its force propel me onto the sofa and let its reverberation shatter the arrogance of my legs that fought to keep me standing pridefully. I crumpled to the ground, and before her I was still and small, meek and humble, a perfect supplicant begging for compassion. She stood above me empty of compassion and mercilessly rebuked, "Truth! I have no time and no patience for your double talk and lies." My reply was soft and pleading, but cut with a subtle sullenness. "Are you mad, woman? Please, please, I hoped you could forgive me." My eyes filled with tears, and I dared to lift myself to my knees, bringing my collapsed, broken shell into a prostration before her. Though I had lifted myself up, I felt insignificant before the aura of her indignation. I was alone before her. Only that bondage that had suffocated me into sleep was with me. She had, as a companion, a terrible wrath which made her boundless. I squealed piteously, "I'm not a bad man." "You're a monster. Men have honour. You have none." I begged, "Please, please, do not let me die with this crime on my heart." "Oh, it is God you fear. Where did your faith go when you bribed a mullah to allow you to rape a girl and steal a family's honour? Your ferocious blunder closed all doors to me. I could neither return to the village nor stay at your home. I lost my family, my honour, my life, just so you could have sex. Please, please, I didn't know. You never cared, and still you wish forgiveness to only win God's mercy. God judges how you have lived, not upon the last-minute appeals a desperate soul pleads." My dream was still going on when the old wheelchair woman shook my foot. "Why are you sobbing? I think you are dreaming. Wake up, Ada." My eyes opened. "Were you dreaming?" "Yes," I replied. During the fever of my terror, sweat had become like a sea on my body, a sea that made my body damp and soft as if my body were a vanishing paper boat being dragged down into the ever-darkening depths of a jealous, grasping ocean. I was frozen in terror for many days and became undecided whether or not I should go to Rubab. I didn't tell anyone about the dream. During Rahit's visits, I kept asking him about his life and his mother. Rahit didn't know much about me, his biological father. Even after all my cruelty, it seemed Rabab had never complained about me. She had not told her son the complete story of his cruel father. I felt I was not only guilty of harming Rubab, but Rohit as well. I wanted to tell him the truth, but I did not dare tell him in person. I decided to write the whole story in a notebook and ask Rohit to take me to Rubab at least once before my last breath. That evening, I asked Rohit to provide me with a notebook and 2 pens. "Are you going to write your autobiography, Baba?" His bright smile contrasted the darkness of my turbulent soul. "Yes, but do not try to read it until I finish it," I said firmly. "Okay, I will be waiting," I'm sure it will be interesting, he said with a fading smile. Son, I am worried about one thing. I looked down. What is it, Baba? He asked, tension on his face. I feel you will hate me after reading my autobiography. I lifted my head and looked at him. No, I'm sure I will not. What on earth makes you think that? He asked. I sank into silence until sorrow prompted me. Son, promise you will like me the same way after reading my story, I pleaded. Of course I will, he promised. I was sure he knew my secrets were about his mother. I was doing a horrible job of hiding. He still didn't ask me anything about her. Perhaps he was simply respecting my privacy, or better yet, he did not want to disturb my declining health any further. The next day, I started writing my story. It was summer, on the day of the wedding ceremony of my brother Haider. My father had arranged a separate dinner party for village women in the city. My mother had forgotten her nighttime glasses at home, so my father sent me to the dinner party with the glasses. While talking to my mother, a fairy-like girl with reddish cheeks, hazel eyes and dark hair arrived. Her eyes were a gorgeous ocean, deep enough to drown you in their beauty. Jalal, this is Mrs. Nihal, and this is Rubab, their first daughter, my mother introduced her to me. Assalamu alaikum, Rubab gently greeted me. She was extremely enticing and quickened my pulse. Rubab, Jalal is the second son of Mrs. Kuro, Rubab's mother explained. Yes, he wants to study law, continued my mother. Nice to meet you, Rubab said gracefully. It is great to meet you. Do you study anything? I managed to inquire. Rubab looked down. Her mother spoke instead. No, she doesn't. We don't let our girls get higher education, just up to grade 10. It is the rule in most Mubahar families. Rubab, go and chat with the other neighbourhood girls. I left the dinner party, my mind filled with visions of the lovely girl. Rubab seemed very docile, but a pure beauty. I had always treated beautiful girls as sex toys. I wanted to have Rubab on my bed as soon as possible at any cost. My father was a police officer, and people feared the Kuro family because of their power. I thought I could use this fear in order to capture Rubab. Though barely an adult, I had already slept with several women. Rubab seemed to be more beautiful than any of them. I didn't know how I could sleep with her, but I could not check my blinding desire. My father's power had lessened my fear for the consequences of my actions. Within a week, I collected some information about Rubab. She never went to the city alone, so it was impossible to kidnap her. She didn't have a phone, so she couldn't be embroiled on the phone in the net of my unrelenting lust. There were only two options for me: either arrange an attack on her home at night or marry her. I shared my feelings with my friends, who often arranged for prostitutes in a hotel. I met the hottest girl any of you have ever seen. I just want her to be in my bed. I told my friends everything about Rubab's family. She belongs to a Mirbahar family, and she has a brother, Gulab. He works in the guava orchards in winter and cuts wood in the summer. My friends suggested that I give Jalal money. We decided that we would invite him to the otak. The next day Jalal came and greeted us nervously, saying, "Is everything all right? You have called a poor man to your service." I looked at him with wide eyes. "Your sister has grown up, and I have heard that she is still not married," saying she has just completed 10th grade. "It is a matter for our elders to think about her marriage," Rubab replied. I didn't know what to say, so my friends told him, "Jalal wants to marry your sister, so make arrangements without any delay. This marriage will be a secret. His parents want him to marry a rich girl, but he wants to marry a girl from a poor family. He believes a poor, simple girl will prove to be a good wife compared to the rich girl. He believes his parents won't force him to marry the rich girl if he has already consummated the marriage and maybe have a son on the way before they learn about it. Your sister will not live in the village. She will stay at Jalal's house in the city." I looked at my friend and was amazed to hear what he said. "Tell your parents to keep this marriage secret for about 6 months." Jalal seemed hesitant. "You will be given a lot of money," my friend added. Greed sparked interest in Jalab's eyes. "I will tell you of my parents' decision tomorrow at this time." My friends told me the rest of the plan after Jalal had left. "What a tangled web we have woven," I said to my friends. I was so lost in the madness of my lust that I didn't know what I was doing. Jalal returned the next day. "I have made my parents agree to your conditions. Who can be a better husband for our sister than Jalal? We have decided to make this marriage happen as soon as possible." It seemed to me that Jalal's family was poor, and they probably thought that Rubab would be living the life of a rich wife if they gave her hand to me. They didn't have a clue of our plans. "That's great. This marriage will take place on Saturday next week in the city," I said to him and gave him some money. "Keep it secret. Saturday evening at this time, a car will be sent for you. Do not bring any relatives, just your family." Everything was going as we had planned. The car brought Rubab's family to the house which we had rented. It wasn't my house. We had bribed a mullah, a religious person who performed the nikah tradition. "Puta, Rubab is a young girl and very shy. I have made her understand everything," said Rubab's mother. "Please don't be quick or angry with her. Let her take time to understand the things of married life. I'm sure she will prove to be a good wife." "Yes, Aman," I said to her. By 9 p.m, Mullah and my friends had left, and Rubab's family stayed in a room. I went to the room where Rubab was waiting for me. "You are such a hot girl," I said to Rubab. I had said the wrong thing, but I didn't realise it at the time. "I couldn't sleep well after that day when I saw you at my brother's wedding. I had to marry you to fulfil my desire. Girls are nothing to me, just sex toys." Worried and pale, she looked at me. I started to take off my clothes. She became nervous. "I cannot wait any more," I hissed. "Take off your clothes." She started to cry. "There is no need to cry. You'll enjoy it." I forcefully took her clothes off and started to kiss her. By midnight, I had become too tired, so I just lay on the bed beside her. I told her the whole plan that we had made to sleep with her. You have destroyed my life, my whole family. I believed my parents and acted upon what they said, Rubab cried. She kept weeping. She wept so much that I thought she might flood the whole house with her tears. An endless rain poured from her eyes. She might never stop, I thought. In the morning, Rubab's family was amazed to see Rubab so distraught, but she remained silent on matters between us. Perhaps she didn't want them to be worried. She probably thought that they wouldn't be able to bear the injustice done to her, so she kept quiet. Her family decided to leave for the village. I will come tomorrow to see Rubab, said Jalal. In the evening, I called my friends over. I didn't sleep at all last night. You are not going to believe this. I did it 5 times, I bragged. Tonight it is your turn. 3 of them decided to go to Rubab that night. I didn't feel bad at all. It was what we had decided. Pleasure before all else. I told Rubab that she would be dealing with my 3 friends that night. Rubab's tears had dried. I could tell she was thinking about something, but I couldn't figure out what. I thought nothing of it. What could she possibly do? We will be back by 8 p.m. Don't worry about anything, I said to her. We locked the door to the house and went out to drink some wine. We came back late. The door of the house was locked, as we had left it, but Rubab was nowhere to be found. She had somehow climbed out the window and run away. We tried to look for her on the road, but we couldn't find her. The next day we told Jalal that Rubab had run away. Poor Jalal was beside himself crying. How could you do that, Rubab? You have dishonoured us. My friends and I told him not to tell his parents anything, otherwise they would not be able to bear such a degrading act by their daughter. We told him to say that she was very happy in her new house and didn't want to come back to the village, and that Jalal would move to Karachi with Rubab very soon. I continued giving money to Jalal for some months. When I moved to Karachi for my education, I didn't go to the village anymore. Rubab's aged parents kept lying to the villagers, claiming Rubab was married and lived in the city of Karachi. A few months passed, and I did not hear any more about Rubab or her family. I married one of my classmates after completing my degree, and a year later we had a son. I didn't continue my studies in law after my graduation, but my wife went to the US for her doctorate degree after 7 years of marriage, leaving Wajdan with me. However, she never returned to Pakistan. We had never gotten along very well, so I did not miss her very much. I hoped that she was doing well, even though she never sent any signs she was even alive. I assumed she must have found a better life for herself in the US. I studied law, but I never practiced justice. Law or Lord could never justify my actions against Rubab. Money and lust had blinded me. I ended my autobiography in the notebook with that admission. 3 days later, Wajdan came to see me. I'm really sorry. I couldn't tell you. I went to the US because of an emergency. Mum tried to commit suicide by jumping from the 2nd floor of her apartment. She was in a coma for almost 2 months and died. Uncle Anas, one of her best friends she had been living with, gave me this letter for you. He said it was her last wish to somehow get this letter to you. I didn't inform you because I knew you couldn't go there. I silently listened to him, and he put the letter in my hand. Rahik came in, and Wajdan became engaged in conversation with him I put the letter under my pillow to look at later. During the night, I opened the letter. Dear Jalal, I cannot find the words to start this letter. My pen shakes and my tears wet the paper. Now that I see my death approaching, I don't want to die with regrets and the truth withering with me. I want to tell you a secret that has made me ashamed of myself for years. Your son, Wajdan, is not your son. He's the child of Anas, our university classmate. I had an affair with him before I married you. After marrying you and owning enough of your wealth, Anas and I made a plan to move to the US. I didn't come here for education. If possible, please forgive me. I cannot say enough how severely this pain in my conscience has been weighing me down. I cannot forgive myself for this. I want to punish myself because I cannot live any more with the torment of my conscience. I'm going to end my life, but before my last breath, I wanted to seek forgiveness from you and tell you what I had done. Eternally sorry, Maria. After reading her letter, I wondered at how the universe works. I wronged someone else's family, and someone else wronged my family. I pondered over God's predefined rules. As you sow, so shall you reap. The next day I said to Rahit, Son, I want to meet your mother. Will you take me to her just once, please? No problem, Baba. I will take you to my home this very evening. Later, Rohit and I went to his home. As I entered, a familiar fragrance from long ago roused my nostrils. It was an absolutely delightful scent, amber with tones of vanilla and musk, mixed with sandalwood and jasmine, finished with a fruity citrus. A scent familiar yet unknown. Led by the sweet aroma, I recalled the fragrance. It was the perfume Rubab wore on her wedding night. A rush of shame shot through me. I stayed at the door of the veranda and watched as Rahit approached his mother, who was coming from another room, and touched her feet. You are home early today, she said. Yes, someone has come to meet you. Rabab looked at me from a distance. She was wearing a hijab and her hands were covered by gloves, more religious than I remembered. She recognized me at the very first glance. She took some steps towards me very slowly, gazing at me through her white glasses and taking her gloves off. I feared she would slap me or spit in my face out of her severe anger, and Rahit would have me expelled from the nursing home. As she reached me, Rahit said, Mother, this is Baba. He has lived in the nursing home for the last 8 months. I'm sorry. I have never asked his actual name. I just call him Baba. He is your Baba, Rahit, Rubab replied to him, still gazing at me. Rahit didn't seem to understand what she said in that simple, pregnant sentence. He appeared baffled by her words. I will be back after I take a shower. Please sit and chat, Rahit said to us, quickly changing the subject and leaving for his room. Rubab slowly moved her hand towards me for a handshake while saying, I knew you'd come eventually. I saw the same ring that I had given her on the Nikah day on her finger. I didn't feel pure enough to shake her hand. I felt myself so polluted that I didn't dare to touch a woman as spotless as an angel. She took my stick, held my hand in hers, and asked me to come inside. I sat on the sofa and without my asking, she went to bring a glass of water for me. She had grown so old that her hand shook as she served the water. I studied her from head to toe. She seemed to be still as pure as when I first saw her at my brother's wedding. I drank the glass of water and remained silent. She gazed at me for a while and said, "Forgive me for leaving your house. I could have remained your sex toy forever, but I would rather die than be that toy for your friends. I jumped into the canal, but I was saved by an angel, Lal Chandar. This person has never tried to even touch me ever. I told him that I am the property of someone else and that I am married. He's a Hindu, but respects humanity more than some Muslims." I felt the shame of her reference. I was that Muslim. I didn't respect humanity. I always used people for my own pleasure and benefit. She continued, "The only person who has touched me in that way is you. Rohit is your son. I became pregnant after that night." I silently listened to her and had no words to speak. The only sentence that I could utter was, "Can you forgive me, Rubab?" Tears poured from my eyes. This was my moment to finally receive the forgiveness I had been longing for. "If you will forgive me, I hope God will also forgive me." I was sobbing. I didn't know what I would do if she could not find it in her heart to forgive me, but I knew that I wouldn't forgive myself for what I had done. She took my hands gently and put them on her eyes. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "If I were to order anyone to prostrate to someone other than Allah, I would have ordered the woman to prostrate to her husband. As God forgives you for what you have done, so shall I. You are my worldly God. I will be yours until my last breath." I burst out sobbing. Finally, I had been forgiven. The feeling I was experiencing was bittersweet. On one hand, how could she have forgiven me after committing such an atrocious act? On the other hand, I was unbelievably grateful that she was so kind-hearted and wonderful that she could find the room to forgive someone even as cruel as I had been to her. I did not deserve her kindness. Rohit came rushing towards us with a look of understanding. He asked us not to cry. His mother, sobbing, said, "Your father has come home to us." "I want to spend the last days of my life with Rohit and you, Rabab," I said. "I want to live with you too, and I want you to take me back to my village, to my family," Rabab said. "I'll take you back home and tell everyone of your purity." The next week, we left for our village. Rohit came with us, but would return to Karachi to look after the elderly people in the nursing home and to read my appalling autobiography that I left in the notebook for him. I couldn't have asked for a better ending. After a month, Rohit wrote me that he read the notebook and that he forgave me, even after all the horrible things I had done. "If my mother can find the room in her heart to forgive you, I can too," he wrote. Rohit was very kind, like his mother. Maybe he realized I had changed and was no longer like my younger self. I believed God had forgiven me too, because he gave me the chance to seek forgiveness from Rubab and Rahit. Now my last breath could be truly happy.
I'm sure you not only enjoyed this story but learned something from it. So let me tell you how I got the inspiration for this story. The inspiration for this story came from a woman in the village. She was married to a man who would savagely beat her and treat her very unfairly. She bore this abuse for many years, but the man didn't change. Her husband's unbearable treatment led to her trying to commit suicide by jumping into a canal. She was saved by a man who would later fight for her in the court. Her family treated her like others do and considered her a Kori, a runaway, shunned as an outcast. Her life was threatened on several occasions and she never returned. So friends, this story gives us many lessons. One of them is living life carefully. When we are children, we don't know much about right and wrong, and we don't worry about our deeds and their consequences. However, when we are grown-ups, we have an understanding of right and wrong. We know what consequences of a certain act might be. So friends, we must live our lives carefully, especially at the age of adulthood. So let's not be reckless or we may regret our deeds like Jalal when we grow old. This story also gives us the message that we must respect women. I hope you understand the messages of the story and will try to live your lives in a best way so that you may not regret at the end of the day. Until next time, goodbye and as always, happy studies.